Hello, welcome back and thank you for joining me. Hit like, hit subscribe, weekly content coming out. Normally every Wednesday, every Thursday, depending how the schedule goes. Today, I wanted to just go through my default settings I have on my audio and MIDI channels in Ableton. They're just something I use as a staple. Obviously, when I'm processing and doing other things past that, I'll add to it and do whatever I have to do. It's more so from a due diligence point of view, a housekeeping point of view, which contributes to my production, obviously, when I'm sound designing, when I'm creating samples, but it also ties into your mixing as well. You'll be conscious of it, but subconsciously you'll start to get into your mixing stuff as well. So on my screen, I've just set up just a loop with some samples just to, present sort of like a track. But for example, if I just Command T and create an audio channel, you'll see down here by default, my default chain is Ableton's utility into FabFilter Pro Q3. I've got a VU meter, BX meter, and span. So the reason why I do that is whether it's audio or MIDI, straight away if I'm using a sound, whether it be sample, and I'm dragging the audio straight in and I've got the data straight away, or if I'm using a MIDI clip and I'm going through different presets or I'm sound designing something in a VST, I know I'm governed by our ears, and so we should be, but I also do like to just visually see what's going on as well. I think it's a good habit to learn. I think it's a good thing to have on each channel and also on your master. So individually, you can sort of do some housekeeping, but then overall, during your production file or even during your mixdown, you can sort of see where you're at from a global point of view. And more than anything, if you're just conscious about it, not so much stressing about it and taking it literally by numbers and stuff like that, but if it's there and you're conscious about it, it can just keep you from making, little mistakes or little do's and don'ts, stuff like that. So something that I've already got up here, I've just put a loop together. I've just got a kick, an offbeat kick, a perk loop, an effect loop, and a hat. So if we just play it in context, pretty straightforward. So let's say I'll start with the kick. What I want to do is straight away, I want to see what's happening with it. And look, I'm using Pro Q3. You can use anything you like. The free alternatives to this that I would recommend would be the TDR Nova, because it does offer dynamic EQ as well. And I'll put a link in the show notes for that. But also, it's nice and big. It's user-friendly for myself, and I love the interface of it. I always use it. When I bring up audio, or I've got a VST in there for MIDI, I just want to see what's going on. So if we isolate the kick, at least I can see what's happening with the kick. I know we can hear it, but at least I can see what's going on with it. And I know where the energy is coming and how it's sort of dispersed across the frequency range. The VU meter I have there, to be honest, I don't really use it much. Obviously, you can see that's way over. This is a already processed limited sample. So you could bring the clip down to get to your negative for your gain staging and stuff like that. But I don't really use VU. BX meter, I like because I can listen to the mono, listen to the side information. I can solo both of them. You can do that in span as well, but I prefer the sound that BX gives. And I use span, which is also a free tool. What you could do is you wouldn't need BX meter. You can not only see the mid and side content in span, but you can also solo it. I'll provide another link in the show notes as well, where they explain how to set it up as mid-side, because if you just download it, it'll just be your mono signal coming through. So obviously the kick's mono, so it's irrelevant here, but you can, up here where you see mid, you hit the solo and you hit only the mono. When you flick mid to side, you could solo that and listen to the side as well. And as you can see, there's nothing there. So that's good to know. And if you don't have BX meter or anything like that, you could just use it within span. Also, the offbeat kick is mono as well. But when we start going into other elements, we can see the stereo field. So what I like about it is straight away, I can just take care of any resonance, any unwanted frequencies, or I can enhance anything I like straight off the bat. Even prior to that, I've got the utility. So if I do want to mono out, if I was doing a kick and a bass, I can straight off the bat. I can also put gain into the clip outside of the volume fader of the channel. And then again, I've got BX meter to solo, and I've got span to just check what's happening. Because during your production, a lot of people might throw samples in, or even with VSTs more so, you might start going through presets, say like Serum, for example. You're going through presets, you like it, you've made your tweaks, you start to use it in your track, and it sounds really good, and your ears get familiar with that. You start living with that sound, you start to like it, you start to develop a song. But then what happens is, if you haven't been conscious of the mid side, sometimes Serum and other VSTs, the stereo information, the side information is actually very loud, and sometimes it trumps the volume of the mid signal. And then when you listen to your track in mono, or you send it off for mastering, or you're mixing it, the mono compatibility is not really there, and it might then start to sound unnatural, and you might lose too much sound from the stereo field when you're trying to then mid-side EQ it. But if you're conscious of it off the bat, if you fall into a preset that you like, or you're sound designing and you get to a point where you want to use it in the track, you can deal with it straight away because you're conscious of it, you're aware of it. So straight away you can mid-side EQ it, maybe bring the mids up, bring the sides down, or process it however you have to, so that it can stay in your track and you can start to live with it and familiarize yourself with it in the right context, rather than just, it sounds good, let's use it. You get post-production into your mix phase or something like that. Then you realize that it doesn't sound compatible in mono, or it is too loud, it is trumping the mono signal. Then it could be problematic, it could be frustrating to your mix-down process and all that sort of stuff. And then even same with anything that has side information, even if we just go into... I know some producers that like to keep their percussion strictly mono. You know, I do that sometimes depending on what other elements I have. So if you are using something percussive or effects like, and you've got this data straight away and you see the Scott side information, you can then decide if you want to keep it there or not. And then if you do, you can work on it and process it and EQ it, or if not, you can just mono it out in utility or mono out just the low end and go from there. So more so it's just your due diligence. But then finally, I've got it on the master as well, generally my production file. Because same sort of thing, well, you know, we've got 5 elements now. I haven't mixed them or anything, I've just done some quick leveling, but... Well, then at least straight away, if you're getting a bit frustrated and you can't really identify what's frustrating you, or you can't really pinpoint what's happening, or what's sort of, you know, giving you the shits, visually we can use these tools to try and check your ears or validate your ears. So that's why I got it on the master as well. So overall, I can sort of see how energetic's my mix, how fulfilled is the frequency spectrum, is there anything problematic, is there anything too high? And I can just use this as a good guide. I don't want to get too fixated on the visuals of everything, but it can definitely help, especially if you're early on and you might not have, you know, the experience in the ears and stuff like that. You can use this just to sort of govern where you could go, what you could work on. And it could save a lot of trial and error and process of elimination. This might be able to quickly pinpoint or identify an issue or a problem or anything that's frustrating. So I have it on the master as well. And it's important for referencing too. So if you do reference your tracks, before I go into that, what I would do as well, what I did do early on was I would just set up an Ableton session, throw a whole bunch of tracks in there as references that I like. Not even to reference into production, but I just like the mix, I like the master. I had played it out, I knew it sounded good. I would visually look at them as I'm listening to them, just to see where the energy was dispersed. So I've just pulled up a track of mine that came out last year. And if we do that, just to see where the energy is. I'll put the audio back on, but even without listening to it, right? Let's say because you're already familiar with the track and you like how it sounds, even without listening to it, you can get a gauge of how full the mix is or how dominant some elements is. You can see here, it's probably the introduction because there's not much, it's more low end heavy, so it could be a bit more stripped back. But if we go throughout the track, so when all the elements are playing, we can sort of see how full the mix is, how balanced the mix is and stuff like that. Now this is a mixed and mastered, it's a completed song. And you can see I like to keep my frequency range quite full and energetic. But another thing, by having this visual setup on each channel, it's more so if you're starting out or at the beginner stage or you don't have too much experience, I think it's very good to get familiar with where instruments lie, where sounds lie within their frequency range. So when you do get to mixing, or you do get to even arrangement with layering different elements and different sounds, if you're conscious and you know generally, because I know sounds vary, but if you know generally where the snare hits, where your 909 ride hits, where your kick drums are most dominant, it's also good to use on individual kicks because you can reference kicks that you like and say, okay, well, this punch is around 110 hertz and the subs, 60 and under, and I like that. But then you might get another kick where the punch is a bit higher at 200, 210, and you've got more low end to work with, but the punch is a bit harder, and then it's got upper mids because it presents more of a transient. If you familiarize yourself with all these different elements, you'll start to be conscious of them when you start choosing your samples, when you start sound designing your own stuff, when you're using a MIDI preset, anything like that. On top of referencing your tracks or other tracks that you like, you'll get to see why it might sound good or how it sounds good, especially on a mix and mastered result where you have the volume. So for example, if I'm doing this, I can flick it to mono to make sure that it's got a good mono compatibility. But I can solo the sides as well to see what's going on. And you can also do that visually. So we can see both. The mono is the darker green, the sides are the lighter green, which you see here. And you see I don't have that much strength in the side signal here. Normally you'll see that's actually a lot quite higher, and if it is louder, it will trump the mono signal and go a different color to identify that it is louder than the mid signal. So that's important. And sorry, back to span. If you don't have BX meter, because it's got a correlation down here, same as BX. When you're on mid here, if I hit solo, I can solo the mids. I can flick this to the side and solo the sides as well. And the beauty is you can change all the colors. You can change the shape of the frequencies. Mine's quite broad and round. You can change those settings as well. So another thing too, by having that on your master, even if it's in your production file or during your mix down, it could save you a lot of time if you do identify something that's frustrating or problematic, because then you can just directly go to that source or that group or that individual channel and sort of work on it rather than guessing and trial and error and going from there. So it's a short video. It wasn't too practical. It was more so me presenting why I've got these things set up. I've done many basic mixing lessons one-on-one where I'll just sort of give him this chain or explain this chain that I have on every channel, more so just to keep conscious of where sounds are sitting, how they hit, how they sound in mono, how they sound when you listen to them on the sides, and then in the context of the whole mix, and then on your master as well. If you're just more aware and conscious of these things, you can save a lot of headache, a lot of mistakes, and you can, if you do all that due diligence as you're going, when you get to your mix down phase, if a lot of the problematic things are sort of being taken care of or being looked after and addressed. Your mix down might not take as long. It might not be as frustrating. You'll be able to sort of, you know that you've done your due diligence as you've gone, as you've picked samples, as you've done all of that. So when you get to your mix down phase, it might be a little more smooth sailing, but then also more enjoyable because you're not sort of just throwing everything into your project. You've got a track that you like, the idea that you like, but then when you get to the mix down phase, it ends up sounding completely different because now you're sort of addressing clashing frequencies or the mid-side relationship with one another and stuff like that. So, very simple chain, but very effective. There's a million alternatives to this. This is just what I use. I would recommend TDR Nova to replace Q3 if you didn't have Q3 and you didn't want to spend the money because TDR Nova is free. The VU, there's a bundle of free ones out there. BX Meter, I personally use and like, but Span can do both of those things as well. And Span's free from Vox and Joe, which I'll include in the show notes. So I hope that was helpful. Enjoy. I've got a new Kickmaster class out now. It's 4 chapters over 3.5 hours. It comes with free bonus samples. That's in my Gumroad in the link below. Like and subscribe. See you next week. Thank you very much. Ciao.